The gunshot that killed her husband echoed through the Montana wilderness 3 days before Daphne Reynolds arrived in Utica. But she would not learn of Thomas's death for another week. The stagecoach rattled over another rut in the road, and Daphne gripped the worn leather seat beneath her, willing her stomach to settle. She had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks, leaving behind the crowded streets of St. Louis for a future she could scarcely imagine. The advertisement had been simple, almost crude in its directness. Rancher seeks wife, must be of good character and willing to work. Contact Marcus Sutton, Utica, Montana Territory. It was 1878, and the Montana Territory was still rough country, a place where civilization clung to the edges of vast wilderness. Daphne knew this, had heard the stories, but desperation had a way of making even the most dangerous prospects seem reasonable. Her father's debts had caught up with her after his death 6 months prior, and the men he owed money to were not the patient sort. When they started coming around her boarding house, when their threats turned from veiled to explicit, she knew she had to leave. The mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like providence. She was 22 years old, educated enough to read and write well, skilled in the domestic arts her mother had taught her before consumption took her. She was not a great beauty, she knew, with her plain brown hair and too wide mouth, but her eyes were a striking green and her figure was trim. More importantly, she was desperate enough to travel halfway across the country to marry a complete stranger. The other passenger in the coach, an older woman named Mrs. Hartley, had been dozing for the past hour. Daphne envied her ability to sleep through the jostling. She turned her attention to the window, watching the landscape transform from rolling hills to something wilder, more untamed. Pine forests stretched as far as she could see, broken occasionally by meadows of tall grass that rippled like water in the wind. "Utica," the driver called from above. "15 minutes to Utica," Mrs. Hartley stirred, blinking awake. "Is this your stop, dear?" "Yes, madam," Daphne said, her hands suddenly cold despite the summer heat. "Meeting family, my intended," Daphne said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Mrs. Hartley's expression softened with understanding. "A mail-order arrangement," Daphne nodded, embarrassed. "Nothing to be ashamed of, child. Half the women in this territory came out the same way. My own daughter did, 5 years back. She is happy as a lark now, 3 children and a good husband who treats her well." She reached over and patted Daphne's hand. "You just keep your wits about you and do not be afraid to speak up if something is not right. Even out here there are laws." The stagecoach rolled into Utica 20 minutes later, the extra time lost to one final creek crossing. The town was smaller than Daphne had imagined. Just a single main street lined with wooden buildings that looked like they had been thrown up in a hurry. A general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a blacksmith, and what appeared to be a combination post office and telegraph station comprised the bulk of the settlement. Beyond the town, she could see clusters of ranches spreading into the valley, smoke rising from chimneys. The coach stopped in front of the boarding house, and the driver climbed down to help the passengers out. Daphne stepped onto the dusty street, her legs unsteady after so long sitting. She held her single carpetbag and looked around, unsure what to do next. Marcus Sutton had written that he would meet her coach, but she had no idea what he looked like. "Miss Reynolds." She turned to find a boy of perhaps 14 standing nearby, hat in hand. He had red hair and freckles, and he looked nervous. "Yes, I am Danny Cooper. Mr. Sutton sent me to fetch you. He is." The boy paused, clearly uncomfortable. "He is detained at the moment, asked me to bring you out to the ranch." Daphne's unease grew. "Detained how?" "There was some trouble with cattle thieves. He is with the sheriff, giving his statement." should not be too long, but he did not want you waiting in town with nowhere to go. It was not the welcome she had hoped for, but Daphne supposed it was better than being abandoned entirely. I see. Thank you, Danny. The boy led her to a wagon hitched nearby and helped her up onto the seat. As they rolled out of town, Daphne studied the landscape with new eyes. This would be her home now, for better or worse. The valley was beautiful in a stark way, mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in July. The grass was golden brown and cattle dotted the hillsides. "How long have you worked for Mr. Sutton?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. "About a year, madam. Since my pa died. Mr. Sutton took me on, gave me work and a place to stay. He is a good man." Danny said this with such conviction that Daphne felt some of her anxiety ease. What is he like? Danny considered this. Fair, works harder than any of us, does not ask anything of his men that he would not do himself, keeps to himself mostly since his brother died. His brother? Yes, madam, Thomas. He died just a few days ago, shot by the same rustlers that have been plaguing the ranches around here. That is why Mr. Sutton is at the sheriff's office. They caught one of them. Daphne's breath caught. The man she was supposed to marry had just lost his brother, and here she was, arriving like some unwanted package. Perhaps I should stay in town, give him time to grieve. Oh, no, madam. He was very specific that I bring you to the ranch. Said he had obligations to honor, and you were one of them. Danny glanced at her, his young face serious. Mr. Sutton always honors his word. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes before the ranch came into view. It was larger than Daphne had expected, with a substantial house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals. Cattle grazed in the near pastures, and she could see several cowboys working with horses in the distance. Danny helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the house. "I will show you inside. Mr. Sutton should be back before supper." The house was well built but clearly lacking a woman's touch. The main room held a large fireplace, a heavy wooden table with chairs, and a few pieces of sturdy furniture. Everything was clean but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. "The bedroom is through there," Danny said, pointing to a door on the left. "There is a spare room too where Thomas stayed. Kitchen is out back. If you are hungry, there is bread and some cold meat in the larder." "Thank you, Danny. You have been very kind." The boy ducked his head, blushing. "Yes, madam, I will be out in the barn if you need anything." After he left, Daphne stood in the middle of the main room, feeling utterly lost. She set her bag down and walked through the house, familiarizing herself with what would be her new home. The bedroom was larger than she expected, with a bed that could fit 2 people, a wardrobe, and a washstand. The spare room was smaller, and she could see signs of recent occupancy. A razor on the stand, a shirt hanging on a peg. Thomas's room. The kitchen was better equipped than the rest of the house, with a good stove, shelves lined with supplies, and a sturdy work table. Daphne found the bread and meat Danny had mentioned and made herself eat, though she had little appetite. As the afternoon wore into evening, her nervousness grew. What would she say to this man? How did one greet a grieving stranger you were supposed to marry? She heard the sound of a horse approaching just as the sun was setting. Daphne smoothed her dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and waited. The door opened, and Marcus Sutton stepped inside. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who worked with his hands. His hair was dark brown, nearly black, and his eyes were a deep blue that seemed to take in everything at once. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. He looked tired, she thought, and sat in a way that went deeper than simple exhaustion. He removed his hat, holding it in both hands. "Miss Reynolds, I apologize for not being here to greet you properly." His voice was deep and rough, like gravel shifting. Daphne found herself standing straighter. "Mr. Sutton, please do not apologize. Danny explained about your brother. I am so very sorry for your loss." Something flickered in his eyes there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "Thank you. I trust the house is acceptable." "Yes, very much so." They stood looking at each other, the silence growing awkward. Finally, Marcus set his hat on a peg by the door and moved further into the room. "I imagine you have questions." "I do, but they can wait. You have had a difficult day." He studied her for a long moment, and Daphne felt herself being assessed. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him because he nodded slightly. "I should be honest with you, Miss Reynolds. When I placed that advertisement, things were different. My brother and I ran this ranch together. We planned to expand, needed more help. I thought a wife would." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "The point is, circumstances have changed. If you want to return to St. Louis, I will pay your passage and give you enough to get settled. I would not hold you to an agreement made under false pretenses." Daphne's heart sank. "You do not want a wife anymore. It is not about what I want. It is about what is fair to you. This is a hard life, Miss Reynolds. The work is endless, the winters are brutal, and now with Thomas gone." He shook his head. "I cannot offer you what I thought I could." "And what was that? Help, partnership. My brother would have been here. You would have had another woman nearby, his wife eventually. Now it is just me and the ranch hands, and I will be working twice as hard to make up for losing Thomas." Daphne took a breath, thinking of St. Louis, of her father's creditors, of the men who had threatened her. "May I be honest with you, Mr. Sutton, please? I did not come here looking for an easy life. I came here because I needed safety and a fresh start. The men my father owed money to were not going to wait forever, and their patience was running out. I have nowhere to go back to. So while I appreciate your offer to send me back, I would prefer to stay if you will have me." Marcus looked at her with new attention. "You are running from debt collectors." "My late father's debt collectors, yes. He was a gambler and not a very good one." "How much did he owe?" "Nearly $3,000. Marcus let out a low whistle. "That is a substantial sum." "Yes, hence my presence here." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I will make you a deal, Miss Reynolds. Stay for a trial period. 1 month. See if you can tolerate the life here, if you can tolerate me. At the end of that time, we can decide whether to make the arrangement permanent or if I should help you get settled somewhere else. Somewhere those debt collectors would not find you." It was more than she had hoped for. "That seems fair." "Good." He moved toward the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I should eat something." "I can prepare something," Daphne offered, following him. "You do not have to do that tonight. I would like to, please. It would help me feel useful." Marcus nodded and stepped back, letting her take over the kitchen. She found eggs and potatoes, some onions and a bit of bacon. Within 30 minutes, she had a decent meal prepared. They ate at the kitchen table, the silence less awkward now that they had reached an understanding. "Tell me about the ranch," Daphne said, wanting to know more. Marcus set down his fork. "We run about 500 head of cattle mostly, some horses too. The ranch is just over 2,000 acres. My father started it 20 years ago, died 5 years back. Thomas and I have been running it since, building it up. We were doing well until the rustlers started hitting us. Danny said they caught one. They did. He is not talking yet, but he will. Sheriff Burns is good at his job." Marcus's expression hardened. "They will hang for killing Thomas." Daphne reached across the table, placing her hand over his before she could think better of it. "I truly am sorry." He looked at their hands, then up at her face. His eyes were vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "Thank you." They finished the meal and Daphne cleaned up while Marcus went to check on the livestock one final time. When he returned, the awkwardness was back. "About the sleeping arrangements," he said. Daphne felt her cheeks heat. "Yes, you take the bedroom. I will sleep in Thomas's room for now." She was relieved and strangely a little disappointed. "Are you certain?" "We are not married yet, Miss Reynolds. I may be a rancher, but I was raised with some manners." "Please call me Daphne." "Daphne," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "And you should call me Marcus." "Marcus," she said, testing it. He nodded, grabbed a blanket from a chest, and headed toward the spare room. "Good night, Daphne." "Good night." Daphne lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the wind in the eaves, the settling of the house itself. She thought about Marcus Sutton, about the grief in his eyes and the gentleness in his offer to send her away. She thought about the month ahead and wondered what would come of it. The next morning she woke before dawn to the sound of men's voices outside. By the time she dressed and made her way to the kitchen, Marcus was already gone. A note on the table read, "Help yourself to breakfast. I will be back by midday. Marcus." Daphne spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly and beginning to make it her own in small ways. She found some wildflowers growing near the creek and put them in a jar on the table. She reorganized the kitchen to be more efficient. She found sheets that needed mending and sat down with needle and thread. Marcus returned just after noon, as promised, with Danny and another ranch hand, an older man introduced as Pete Holloway. "Miss Reynolds, pleasure," Pete said, removing his hat. His hair was steel gray and his face was weathered, but his eyes were kind. "Please call me Daphne." "Yes, madam." She served them lunch, which she had prepared from supplies in the larder. The men ate with obvious appreciation, and Daphne felt a small glow of satisfaction. She could do this, she thought. She could be useful here. After lunch, Marcus asked if she wanted to see more of the ranch. She agreed eagerly, changing into her sturdiest boots. He saddled a gentle mare for her, and they rode out together across the property. "This is the north pasture," Marcus said, gesturing to a broad expanse of grassland. "We rotate the cattle through different areas to keep from overgrazing. Thomas designed the system. He was clever then. He was. Better with planning than I am. I am more the hands-on type." Marcus pointed to a line of trees in the distance. "That is Willow Creek. It runs year-round, one of the reasons my father chose this land." They rode for over an hour, and Marcus showed her the different areas of the ranch, explaining how everything worked. Daphne listened carefully, asking questions when she did not understand. She could see him relaxing as he talked, his grief receding slightly in the face of his clear love for this land. "You really care about this place," she observed. "It is all I have now," he said simply. They rode back as the afternoon was waning. That evening, Daphne cooked dinner for Marcus and the ranch hands who lived on the property. Danny, Pete, and two younger men named Jack and Samuel. The men were initially shy around her, but she worked to put them at ease, asking about their work and listening to their stories. As the days passed, Daphne fell into a rhythm. She woke early, prepared breakfast, tended the kitchen garden she had discovered behind the house, made lunch, did laundry and mending, and prepared dinner. The work was endless, but it was honest work, and she found satisfaction in it. More than that, she found herself increasingly drawn to Marcus. He was a quiet man, not given to idle chatter, but when he did speak, his words had weight. He was unfailingly kind to her, making sure she had what she needed, asking if the work was too much. She noticed the way he was with his men, firm but fair, always willing to work alongside them. She noticed the way he cared for the animals, gentle with even the most stubborn horse. She noticed the way he looked when he thought no one was watching, the grief still raw in his eyes. 2 weeks into her stay, a storm rolled through the valley. It started in the afternoon, dark clouds building over the mountains. By evening, the wind was howling and rain lashed the windows. Marcus and the men worked to secure everything, bringing the horses into the barn and checking that the cattle were settled. Daphne had dinner ready when they came in, soaked and exhausted. She had heated water for washing and set out dry clothes she had mended. The men thanked her profusely, and she saw Marcus watching her with an expression she could not quite read. After the others had gone to their bunks, Marcus lingered in the kitchen, drying his hair with a towel. "You did not have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to. You are good at this, taking care of people." Daphne smiled. "My mother taught me that a home should be a refuge. I am trying to make this feel like that for all of you." Marcus set down the towel and looked at her directly. "You are succeeding." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Daphne did not have a name for. Then lightning flashed, thunder cracked overhead, and the moment broke. "I should let you rest," Marcus said, stepping back. "Yes. Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Daphne." But she did not sleep well that night. The storm raged outside, and inside her thoughts raged just as wildly. She was falling for Marcus Sutton, she realized. Falling for his quiet strength, his gentleness, the way he cared for everything and everyone around him even while carrying his own grief. It was foolish, perhaps, to feel so much so quickly, but she could not help it. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed. Daphne was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard shouting from outside. She rushed to the door to see riders approaching, 6 of them, armed and rough-looking. Marcus was already out of the house, and Pete, Jack, and Samuel were emerging from the barn. Danny ran from the stable. "That is far enough," Marcus called out when the riders were about 50 yards away. The lead rider, a large man with a scarred face, laughed. "That is no way to greet visitors, Sutton. You are not visitors. You are trespassers. State your business or leave. Our business is with you. See, we heard you have been talking to the sheriff about our operation." Daphne's blood ran cold. These were the rustlers, or some of them. "Your operation," Marcus said, his voice hard as iron, "involves stealing cattle and murdering ranchers. Damn right I talked to the sheriff." "That was a mistake," the scarred man said. He pulled his gun and the other riders did the same. Everything happened very fast. Marcus drew his own weapon, as did Pete and the others. Daphne wanted to scream, to run to Marcus, but she forced herself to stay still. Shots rang out, the sound deafening. One of the rustlers fell from his horse. Marcus took cover behind a water trough, returning fire. Then Daphne saw one of the rustlers circling around, trying to get a clear shot at Marcus from the side. Without thinking, she grabbed the rifle that hung by the door, the one Marcus had shown her how to use just a few days ago when she asked about protecting herself. She stepped onto the porch, raised the rifle, and fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough to startle the rustler's horse. The animal reared, throwing its rider. Marcus took advantage of the distraction and fired, hitting another of the attackers. The remaining rustlers, seeing they were outmatched, wheeled their horses and fled, leaving 2 of their number on the ground and a third limping away on foot. Marcus ran to Daphne, his face pale. "Are you hurt?" "No. Are you?" "No." He looked at the rifle in her hands, then back at her face. "You could have been killed. So could you?" For a moment she thought he might yell at her, but instead he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic pace of her own. "Do not ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Do not expect me to stand by and watch you die," she replied, He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands on her shoulders. "Daphne." Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by Pete calling out, "Marcus, this one is still alive." Marcus reluctantly released her and went to examine the wounded rustler. The man was conscious, bleeding from a shoulder wound. "Get him inside," Marcus ordered. "We will patch him up and then take him to the sheriff. Danny, ride to town and tell Sheriff Burns what happened. Jack, Samuel, check the perimeter. Make sure the others are not coming back." The men moved to obey. Daphne found herself helping to tend the wounded rustler, which felt strange given that he had just tried to kill Marcus. But her upbringing would not let her stand by while someone suffered, even an enemy. "Why did you come here?" Marcus demanded as Daphne cleaned the man's wound. The rustler, younger than Daphne had initially thought, perhaps only 25, grimaced in pain. "Boss's orders. Said we needed to send a message." "Who is your boss?" "I am not telling you that. You will tell the sheriff or you will hang without a trial. Your choice." The young man paled but remained silent. Sheriff Burns arrived within 2 hours, a tall man in his 50s with a stern face and sharp eyes. He took custody of the prisoner and examined the bodies of the dead rustlers. "This is escalating," he said to Marcus. "They are getting bolder." "I know." "What are you going to do about it?" "I've got men tracking the gang's hideout. Should have them located within a few days. Once we do, we will raid it and put an end to this." "I want to be there when you do." Sheriff Burns shook his head. "You are too close to this, Marcus. They killed your brother." "Exactly why I need to be there," the sheriff sighed. "I will think about it. In the meantime, you watch yourself, and keep that woman of yours safe. She has got more grit than half the men in this territory." After the sheriff left, Marcus was quiet and tense. Daphne made dinner, but he barely ate. The ranch hands were subdued, the reality of the danger settling over all of them. That night, Marcus knocked on Daphne's bedroom door. She opened it to find him standing there, still dressed, looking exhausted. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He entered but did not sit, pacing instead. "I need to tell you something." "All right." "This morning, when those men came, when you stepped out with that rifle, I thought my heart would stop." He turned to face her. "I realized that somewhere in the past 2 weeks you have become important to me, more important than I expected, and the thought of you being hurt because of me, because of this ranch." "Marcus," Daphne said softly, stepping closer, "I am not afraid. You should be. You saw what happened to Thomas. I saw what happened when brave men stood up to criminals. I saw you defend your home, your people. I saw courage." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the walls he had built around his grief beginning to crack. "Your month is not up yet. You could still leave." "I do not want to leave." "Why not?" Daphne took a breath, deciding to be brave. "Because I care about you, Marcus Sutton. I care about this place, these people. I care about what we are building here. If you will have me, not just for a month, for good." Marcus closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing passion. Daphne felt herself melting into him, her hands gripping his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I did not expect this," Marcus said. "Did not expect you, neither did I. We should do this properly. I should court you, marry you the right way." Daphne smiled. "I came here to marry you, Marcus. I think we can skip straight to the marriage part if you want. I want to do right by you. Then marry me tomorrow. We can get the pastor from town." He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "You are impatient. I am practical, and I know what I want." Marcus kissed her again, softer this time. "Tomorrow, then." They married the next day in the main room of the ranch house, with Pastor Williams performing the ceremony and the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Daphne wore the best dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Marcus wore a clean shirt and looked more nervous than she had ever seen him. The ceremony was brief, but the words were binding. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such tenderness that Daphne felt tears prick her eyes. Pete had somehow managed to produce a cake, which they shared with everyone. It was a humble celebration, but it was filled with genuine joy. Daphne looked around at the faces of these men who had become her family and felt a deep sense of belonging. That night, alone in their bedroom, Marcus was gentle with her. He took his time making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted this. Daphne had been raised to believe that marital relations were a duty, something to be endured, but with Marcus, it was nothing like that. It was beautiful and intimate and left her feeling cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms, she traced patterns on his chest. "Tell me about Thomas." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "He was 3 years younger than me, always smiling, always joking. He could make friends with anyone. He wanted to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses. He was engaged to a girl in town, Sarah Mitchell. They were supposed to marry in the fall." His voice cracked slightly. "He should have had a life." "I am so sorry," Daphne whispered. "I keep thinking I should have been there that day. We were checking different parts of the property. If I had been with him, maybe." "You cannot think that way. You will drive yourself mad." Marcus turned to look at her. "How did you get to be so wise?" "I am not wise. I just know grief. I lost both my parents within a year of each other. The guilt, the what-ifs, they will eat you alive if you let them." He pulled her closer. "I am glad you are here. So am I." The next few days passed peacefully. Daphne settled into her role as Marcus's wife, finding joy in the small intimacies of married life. She learned his habits, his preferences. He took his coffee black, preferred beef to pork, read in the evenings when he had time. She discovered that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, that he hummed tunelessly when he was concentrating, that he was ticklish just below his ribs. Marcus, for his part, seemed to bloom under her attention. The grief was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. He smiled more, laughed occasionally. He started talking about the future again, making plans. A week after their wedding, Sheriff Burns returned with news. "We found their hideout. Canyon about 15 miles north of here. I am taking a posse up tomorrow to raid it. I thought you should know." "I am coming with you," Marcus said immediately. "Marcus, I do not think that is wise." "I am coming, Sheriff. Those men killed my brother. I have a right to be there." Sheriff Burns looked at Daphne, as if hoping she would talk sense into her husband. But Daphne knew Marcus well enough now to know that he needed this. He needed to see justice done. "Be careful," was all she said. Marcus kissed her forehead. "I will." He left before dawn the next morning with the sheriff's posse, 12 men in total. Daphne watched him go with a tight feeling in her chest, fear warring with understanding. The day passed slowly. She tried to keep busy with chores, but her mind kept wandering to Marcus, wondering if he was safe. Pete stayed back with Danny and Jack to watch the ranch, and their presence was some comfort. It was nearly dark when Daphne heard riders approaching. She rushed outside to see the posse returning. Her eyes found Marcus immediately, and relief flooded through her when she saw he was unhurt. The men looked tired but satisfied. Sheriff Burns dismounted and removed his hat. "It is done, Mrs. Sutton. We got the whole gang, 3 dead including the leader, 5 in custody. They will stand trial, but the evidence is solid. They will hang." Marcus dismounted and came to Daphne, pulling her into his arms. She could feel the tension draining out of him. "It is over," he said into her hair. "It is finally over." That night, he held her close and wept for his brother, truly wept for the first time since Thomas's death. Daphne held him and let him grieve, offering no platitudes, just her presence and her love. In the morning, Marcus seemed lighter, as if the tears had washed away some of the weight he had been carrying. He smiled at her over breakfast, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being here, for understanding, for being you." Daphne reached across the table and took his hand. "There is nowhere else I would rather be." The summer passed into fall, and Daphne learned the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to churn butter, to preserve vegetables from the garden, to smoke meat for the winter. She learned to ride better, until she could gallop across the pastures with confidence. She learned the names and personalities of the cattle, much to Marcus's amusement. "You are the only person I know who names cows," he teased one afternoon as they repaired a fence together. "They are individuals," she protested. "That one is clearly Matilda, and the big one over there is a leaner." He laughed and kissed her, right there in the middle of the pasture, and Daphne thought she had never been happier. In October, Marcus took her to town for the harvest dance. It was the first time Daphne had been back to Utica since her arrival, and she was nervous about meeting the townspeople properly. But she need not have worried. The women welcomed her warmly, curious about the mail-order bride who had married Marcus Sutton. Sarah Mitchell was there, Thomas's former fiancée. She was a pretty blonde woman with sad eyes. She approached Daphne hesitantly. "Mrs. Sutton, I am Sarah. Please call me Daphne. I am so sorry about Thomas." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I heard you and Marcus married." "I am glad. He deserves happiness, and I think you make him happy. I try, take care of him. He acts tough, but he feels things deeply." "I know I will." Marcus appeared then, offering Daphne his hand. "May I have this dance?" She had never danced with him before and discovered that he was surprisingly graceful for such a large man. He held her close as they moved to the music, and Daphne felt the eyes of the town on them. "They are all watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch. I have the most beautiful woman in the territory in my arms." Daphne blushed. "Marcus Sutton, are you flirting with your own wife? Is it working?" "Maybe." He grinned and spun her, making her laugh. They danced until they were both breathless, then stepped outside for some air. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. "Are you happy, Daphne?" Marcus asked, his arm around her waist. "Incredibly happy." "Are you?" "I did not think I could be after Thomas, but you have given me that. You have given me a reason to look forward instead of back." "We give that to each other," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "I was lost before I came here. You gave me a home, a purpose, a life worth living." He kissed her under the stars, and Daphne knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice in answering that advertisement. Winter came hard and fast to Montana that year. By November, snow was piling up outside, and the temperature plummeted. The ranch work became more difficult, focused on keeping the livestock fed and sheltered. Daphne spent her days ensuring the house stayed warm, cooking hearty meals, and mending the endless tears and worn spots in clothes. On the first day of December, she woke feeling nauseated. At first, she attributed it to something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for several days, always worse in the morning, she began to suspect the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and fear. She wanted a child, wanted to build a family with Marcus, but the prospect was daunting. Her mother had died from complications of childbirth, delivering a stillborn baby when Daphne was 15. The memory haunted her. She decided to wait to tell Marcus until she was certain. By mid-December, there was no doubt. She had missed her monthly courses, her breasts were tender, and the morning nausea had become a predictable routine. She chose to tell him on Christmas Eve. She had spent the day preparing a special dinner, and she had sewn him a shirt as a gift, using fabric she had ordered from the general store. After dinner, they sat by the fire, the house quiet and peaceful. "I have something to tell you," Daphne said, her hands twisted in her lap. Marcus looked at her, his expression becoming concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so. I hope you will be happy." "Daphne, you are worrying me." She took a breath. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features, transforming him. "A baby? Yes, sometime in early summer, I think." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am going to be a father. You are happy." "Happy." "Daphne, I am overjoyed." He pulled back to look at her face, then frowned. "But you look worried. What is it?" She told him about her mother, about her fear of childbirth. Marcus listened carefully, his arms around her the whole time. "We will make sure you have the best care," he said firmly. "I will bring a doctor out from Helena if I have to. You and this baby are going to be fine." "You cannot promise that." "No, but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Daphne leaned into him, letting his strength and confidence ease her fears. They would face this together, just as they faced everything together. The winter seemed to stretch on forever, but finally, spring arrived. Daphne's belly grew round with the baby, and Marcus became almost comically protective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and worried if she so much as sneezed. "Marcus, I am pregnant, not fragile," she protested one afternoon in April when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, but humor me." She sighed but let him take the basket. In truth, she found his protectiveness endearing if occasionally excessive. In May, Marcus hired a woman from town, Mrs. Anderson, to come stay at the ranch as Daphne's time approached. Mrs. Anderson had delivered dozens of babies and had a calm, no-nonsense manner that Daphne found reassuring. The baby came in early June, on a warm night when the sky was clear and full of stars. The labor was long and painful, lasting nearly 18 hours. Daphne thought she might die from the pain, but Mrs. Anderson and Marcus stayed with her the entire time, encouraging her, helping her through each contraction. Finally, as the sun was rising, Daphne gave one last push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Anderson announced, placing the squalling infant on Daphne's chest. "A healthy boy." Daphne looked down at her son, at his red face and tiny fists, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Marcus stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face, staring at their child with wonder. "He is perfect," Marcus said hoarsely. "He is," Daphne agreed. They named him Thomas Marcus Sutton, after the uncle he would never meet. Thomas had Marcus's dark hair and Daphne's green eyes, and from the start he had a strong personality. He nursed vigorously, slept fitfully, and had a cry that could wake the dead. Marcus was a devoted father, often taking the baby so Daphne could rest. She would wake in the night to find him walking the floor with Thomas, murmuring softly to their son. Watching them together, Daphne felt her heart expand with love for both of them. The ranch hands were all smitten with the baby. Even gruff Pete melted when Thomas grabbed his finger with one tiny hand. Danny, now 15 and shooting up in height, proclaimed himself Thomas's official protector. As summer turned to fall and Thomas grew from a helpless newborn into an alert, curious infant, Daphne reflected on how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been desperate and afraid, fleeing from her father's debts with nowhere to go. Now she had a home, a husband she loved deeply, and a beautiful son. She had found not just safety, but joy. One evening in September, after putting Thomas to bed, Daphne and Marcus sat on the porch watching the sunset. Marcus had his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "Do you ever think about how we met?" she asked. "All the time." "Do you regret placing that advertisement?" Marcus turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "I regret that I placed it for the wrong reasons. I thought I needed help with the ranch, someone to cook and clean and make life easier. But what I got was so much more. I got you, Daphne. I got love and partnership and a family. I got a reason to build something lasting, something beyond just the land." "I got the same," Daphne said softly. "I came here looking for safety and found a home, found you, found a life I never knew I wanted." "We are quite a pair," Marcus said with a smile. "Yes, we are." The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy with his father's love for the land and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Daphne gave birth to twin girls, Lucy and Rose, who had their father wrapped around their tiny fingers from the moment they arrived. 2 years after that came another boy, James, quieter and more studious than his older brother. The ranch prospered under Marcus's management. He expanded the cattle operation and started breeding horses, fulfilling the dream that Thomas had once had. The house was enlarged to accommodate their growing family, gaining a second story and more bedrooms. Daphne became a fixture in the community, known for her kindness and her skill with healing herbs. She tended to sick neighbors, helped deliver babies, and organized charity drives for families in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and afraid, and she was determined to help others who found themselves in similar circumstances. Danny Cooper grew up and married a sweet girl named Emma. They built a house on the edge of the ranch property, and Danny became Marcus's right-hand man, managing much of the daily operations. Pete Holloway eventually retired, but stayed on the ranch in a small cabin, regaling the Sutton children with tales of the old days. Sarah Mitchell eventually married a shopkeeper from Helena and moved away, but she and Daphne exchanged letters regularly. Daphne was glad that Sarah had found happiness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Daphne back to the spot where they had first kissed in the pasture. The children were with Mrs. Anderson in town for the day, giving them rare time alone. "You remember?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the fence they had been repairing that day. "Of course I remember. You told me I was the only person you knew who named cows. You still do that. They still deserve names." Marcus laughed and pulled her close. "I love you, Daphne Sutton. I loved you when you stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified. I loved you when you grabbed that rifle to protect me. I loved you when you brought our son into the world. I love you more every single day." Daphne felt tears sting her eyes. "I love you too, Marcus. You gave me everything I did not know I needed. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me yourself." They kissed as they had 10 years before, but it was different now. Deeper, richer, filled with the weight of shared history and enduring love. As they rode back to the ranch house, Daphne looked out over the land that had become hers, at the mountains in the distance, and the cattle grazing peacefully. She thought about the frightened young woman who had arrived here a decade ago, fleeing danger and seeking refuge. She thought about how that woman had found so much more than safety. She had found love. She had found home. She had found herself. The Sutton Ranch continued to thrive as the Montana Territory moved toward statehood in 1889. Marcus and Daphne's children grew up strong and capable, each finding their own path. Thomas took to ranching like he was born to it, showing the same dedication and work ethic as his father. The twins, Lucy and Rose, were inseparable and shared a love for the horses that rivaled their father's. James, true to his quieter nature, became fascinated with books and learning, and Marcus proudly sent him to study in Helena when he was old enough. In 1890, Daphne gave birth to their fifth and final child, a daughter they named Grace. She was a surprise, arriving when Daphne was 34 and had thought her childbearing years were over. Grace was a gentle, thoughtful child who seemed to bring joy wherever she went. As Marcus and Daphne entered their 40s, they began to slow down, letting their older children and the ranch hands take on more responsibility. They spent more time together, taking long rides across their land, sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset, reading together by the fire in winter. Daphne never heard from her father's creditors again. Whether they had forgotten about her, decided the debt was not worth pursuing, or met their own ends in St. Louis's rough streets, she never knew and did not care. That life felt like it belonged to a different person entirely. On a warm summer evening in 1895, when Daphne was 39 and Marcus was 43, they sat on their porch surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Thomas had married a rancher's daughter named Catherine, and they had given Marcus and Daphne their first grandchild, a boy named Marcus Jr. Danny and Emma's 3 children played in the yard with the Sutton youngsters. Daphne looked around at the family they had built, the life they had created, and felt overwhelming gratitude. She caught Marcus's eye across the porch, and he smiled at her, that warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat even after 17 years of marriage. Later, when everyone had gone home or to bed, Marcus and Daphne sat alone under the stars. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, echoing the question she had asked him so many years ago. "Not a single one," Daphne replied. "You? Only that I did not find you sooner," she laughed. "I was probably too young for you sooner." Fair point. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. The ranch stretched out around them in the darkness, familiar and beloved. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and cattle shifted in their sleep. "We built something good here," Marcus said finally. "We did," Daphne agreed. "Something lasting. Something worth fighting for. Something worth running toward instead of running away from." Marcus brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher's advertisement. Thank you for being the man worth taking a chance on." As the years continued to pass, the Sutton Ranch became known throughout Montana not just for its quality cattle and horses, but for the family that ran it. The story of how Marcus and Daphne met became something of a legend in the area, proof that sometimes the most desperate circumstances could lead to the greatest blessings. When Montana achieved statehood in 1889, Marcus and Daphne attended the celebration in Helena with their children. They stood together as the territory they had helped tame became officially part of the United States, and Daphne thought about how far they had all come. Marcus continued to mentor young ranchers, sharing the knowledge he and Thomas had accumulated over the years. He never spoke of his brother without pain, but the pain had softened over time, becoming bittersweet rather than sharp. Thomas's memory lived on in the ranch's success, in his nephew's name, in the horse breeding program that Marcus had built. Daphne continued her work in the community, expanding her healing practice as she learned more about herbs and medicine. She helped deliver dozens of babies, tended countless injuries and illnesses, and provided comfort to the dying. She never charged for her services, instead accepting payment in goods or labor, or sometimes simply in gratitude. Their children thrived. Thomas expanded the ranch's operations, adding more acreage and diversifying their stock. Lucy married a veterinarian and helped establish the first proper animal hospital in the region. Rose became a teacher, educating the children of ranchers and townspeople alike. James finished his education and returned home to manage the ranch's business affairs, his head for numbers proving invaluable. Grace, the youngest, showed a talent for music and brought culture to their corner of Montana with concerts and singing lessons. As Marcus and Daphne grew older, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, harsh winters, droughts, the occasional bout of cattle disease, the normal trials of raising 5 children. Through it all, they had remained partners, supporting each other through every challenge. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a grand celebration. Half the territory seemed to turn out, filling the ranch with music and laughter. Daphne wore a beautiful dress that Lucy and Rose had made for her, deep green to match her eyes. Marcus wore a new suit that made him look distinguished and handsome, though his hair was now touched with silver. As they danced together under lantern light, surrounded by everyone they loved, Daphne thought back to that scared young woman on the stagecoach. She wished she could tell her younger self that everything would be all right, that the gamble she was taking would pay off beyond her wildest dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, pulling her closer. "How lucky I am, how grateful." "The luck was all mine. You saved me, Daphne. After Thomas died, I was drowning in grief. You gave me a reason to keep going." "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "Yes," he agreed. "We did." The Montana night wrapped around them, vast and starlit, as it had on so many nights before. The ranch that had been Marcus's refuge, then their home, had become a legacy for their children and grandchildren. The land that had seen tragedy and triumph, danger and joy, stood testament to what two people could build when they faced life together. In the early years of the new century, as Marcus and Daphne moved into their 60s, they gradually handed over the ranch's operations to their children. Thomas ran the day-to-day management with skill and wisdom, proving himself every bit his father's son. The other children contributed in their own ways, creating a family business that was stronger for their different talents. Marcus and Daphne spent their later years doing the things they loved most, riding across their land, tending the garden Daphne had expanded over the years, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and simply being together. They had earned their rest, and they savored it. One evening, sitting on their porch as the sun set over the mountains they had watched for decades, Marcus took Daphne's hand. "You remember what you said to me that first night, when I offered to send you back to St. Louis?" Daphne thought back across the years. "I said I needed safety and a fresh start. You said you came here because you needed safety, you needed a fresh start." He squeezed her hand. "I came here needing a wife to help run a ranch. What we both found was so much more. Love," Daphne said softly. "Family, home, purpose." "Everything that matters," Marcus agreed. They sat together as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, as it had countless times before and would countless times again. The ranch was quiet except for the evening sounds they knew so well. Cattle settling for the night, horses nickering in the barn, the wind through the pine trees. Daphne leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, feeling utterly content. They had built a good life together, she and this man who had started as a stranger and become her everything. They had faced dangers and overcome them. They had grieved and celebrated. They had raised children and watched those children raise children of their own. Most importantly, they had loved each other through it all, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. The rancher had needed a wife to help run his expanding ranch and ease his loneliness. The young woman had needed safety from her father's creditors and a chance at a new life. What they had found was partnership, passion, purpose, and a love that would endure for all their days. As darkness fell over the Montana landscape, Marcus and Daphne Sutton sat together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life. They had found everything they needed, and more than they had ever dreamed possible. And they lived out their remaining years in the deep contentment that comes from a life well lived and a love well earned. Their story a testament to the truth that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most extraordinary destinations. Their children and grandchildren would tell their story for generations, a reminder that taking a chance on love, even when circumstances seem impossible, can lead to miracles. The sun set on another day at the Sutton ranch, and Marcus kissed his wife's forehead as the first stars appeared. Tomorrow would bring new joys and challenges as every day did, but they would face it together as they always had. That was all that mattered. That was everything.